game-changing discussions on the big ideas that shape our thinking. This is One2One.
Moses Babatope is founder and CEO of Nile Media Entertainment and co-founder of the FilmHouse Group, one of the largest cinema operators and film distribution companies in the country. A leading figure in the Nigerian and African film industry, he started his career in the film business at the Odeon Cinema in the United Kingdom and has over the last 20 years played a key role in bringing African film experiences to international and global audiences. Moses Babatope, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Great to be here.
Good, fantastic. Now, of course, on this program, we've had Kule Afolayan, we've had the great Mr. Shaibu, the regulator.
Yes. Yeah.
Of course, actors, producers, regulators. But you are the money. You are absolutely the money.
I hope I don't get in trouble when this. Yeah.
So I want to talk about the business.
Okay.
I'd like to hear you talk to me a bit about Nile Entertainment. How did you get there, and what's that all about?
So the Nile Media Entertainment Group, I think, was born out of a passion, to just do things differently, to prioritize the creator, the creative, as if you like, to task ourselves with sweating those opportunities that we know exist, even in a very difficult climb. To going out there, in the diaspora and finding the communities that want to watch and support our work, to leveraging on technology, and technological advancements, that we keep seeing every day. We're seeing, unicorns being made every day of technology, and technology intersecting with almost every segment of society: health, insurance, agri, education. Why not entertainment? Why not film? Why not film industry in Nigeria? And for us, we're just kind of looking at what can we do in that regard? How can we infuse technology? And for me, the big passion is, over time, just watching the commercialization, as it were. So I remember, when actively joining the cinema industry, when it was less than 10 cinemas. Today is 80. I would have loved it to be 800, but we've made progress. When box office value was at 2 billion, as of last year's 11.9 billion.
0.9.
Yes, there's inflation. Yes, all the critics will come up with all sorts of things to puncture, that trajectory. But trajectory suggests, that it's been growing. Yes, the attendance is not what it should be, but generally people are still coming and people are still transacting. So for me, just looking at those fundamentals that, people would pay for, people would value what has been created. How can we grow it?
Yes.
What are the learnings from the past? How can we look into the future and be more aggressive about taking the opportunities that the future presents? And that's for us at Now Media, just looking at new ways of doing things, and just being bold and ambitious. And I think at the core of that in the film industry, some of the things I've been missing are around transparency, which is something that, I'm very passionate about. And I'm glad that, some antecedents demonstrate that I'm all for transparency. I was one of the people, working very much with, colleagues in the association to push for box office, data, and working with ComScore. Very, proud to say, facilitated their first trip here. And the transparency of the box office literally was a watershed moment, for the film industry, because it gave insight as to what's possible when the industry is properly structured.
Of course.
When you can see a film releases on so amount of prints in so amount of locations. This is the genre. These are the people that star in it. This is how much it made in the opening weekend. This is what it made lifetime. Those things really took us to the next level. And the fact that people could look and see that those things work. I think a lot of people underestimate it in the industry. The likes of Netflix and Prime do not ignore those things. Those things are very key metrics that they still look at, in the world today. The likes of Prime are, haven't taken up MGN studios. I have films that they release on cinema, and cinema is a benchmark. And I'm so glad that we were able to get that foundation. And when we talk about the money side, I think that's also what gives us the boldness that, if we could do this, in cinema, imagine the opportunities that are available on digital.
Of course.
In 2025. Imagine the opportunities that are available in a territory that boasts of so many creatives. In a territory that, people really, find succor and, relaxation relaxation great skits and watching short films and watching films on YouTube. So for me, those are the things that have driven us to saying, let's be a viable alternative channel, a viable, option for creatives to work with, to help amplify their stories, help crucially monetize their talent. And those are amongst a number of things for us and why we are ready to play very actively and seriously in the space.
Let's dip a little bit into the question of the box office value.
Yes.
Amazing. 11.9 billion.
11.5 billion.
0.5 billion.
Yes.
That was last year,
2024.
Compared with?
Compared with I think it was just over 7 billion in 2023.
In 2023. So
yeah.
That's a
really
reasonable growth there.
Absolutely.
Obviously, I'm sure an upward trajectory.
Yes, upward trajectory.
But I'd like us to tease that out a little bit further.
Okay.
Of course, that's the total box office figure.
Yes.
How much of that would you say is local Nigerian content?
Yes. So as of today, 2025, I'm very proud to say we are hovering around the 47 to 49% mark.
Wow.
Last year, I believe it was between 42 and 46%. Right. And look, this is phenomenal. It's great. When you think that the average ticket price of a Nigerian film, is I don't want to say significantly less, but is less than a Hollywood film for a variety of reasons. Hollywood films will come in what we call premium formats. So it will come in an IMAX format, which is traditionally more expensive than saying most Hollywood films as well. A number of their blockbusters are in 3D, which is, again, attracts a premium pricing. Nollywood films are typically 2D, digital. That's what you get. So to be at that market share in an era where streaming is still here and has compelling product, in an era where high inflationary environment, in an era where there's just more options.
YouTube is taking off.
YouTube has taken off. It's a real phenomenal achievement. Then when you compare to what is happening in other regions on the continent, it makes you really, really proud.
South Africa, for example.
South Africa, for example, I am happy you mentioned it. South Africa, great country, amazing people. Traditionally even more ahead of us in terms of the cinema business because they have the mall infrastructure, and in every mall or most malls there are cinemas. South Africa is less than 5% in terms of the, South African content box office.
Okay.
In East Africa is non-existent, if at all it can be measured. In Central Africa, they barely have cinemas. The closest and maybe the one that is probably as competitive, if not slightly higher than ours, is Egypt. Because Egypt is a country that, again, we're paying close attention to and kind of learning a lot of what they're doing. Because Egypt is not only strong, Egyptian films are not only strong in Egypt, they're very strong in the Middle East as well. But in Africa, we are a very strong second, position. And if you think that, 23 years ago, 24 years ago, there was barely any cinemas.
Yes.
If you just go back 10 years, it was less than 10%. And here we are with all the adversity in a deeply, and I like to stress this, deeply independent industry.
Yes.
It's not an industry made of studios or made up of very capitalized, production houses.
Yes.
This is independent production firms
Yes.
getting their head above water, finding marketing resources, and being able to make an impression to get people to watch and pay their naira.
Yeah.
I think it's commendable.
And simply because it's such an important point, just to clarify that,
Yes.
what that means really
Yes.
is that just under 50%
Yes.
of all movies
Yes.
watched in Nigerian today
Yes.
is local content.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
That is mind-boggling.
In quantity, in quality, but not quality, in number of films released, and also the value of the box office.
Of the
Correct.
box office.
Yes.
Wow, amazing. Well, thank you for that. Before I move off the subject, I'm tempted to ask,
Yeah.
in your opinion, what does that say, really? Because the film's an expression of culture.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? What does that say about the strength of our culture as a people, and how proud we are of that culture?
I think it shows us how far we've come, because again, I'm so just looking at the data, and people like us that look at the back end and see that trajectory. And let's not forget, there was a huge global event in the pandemic that reset everything everywhere,
Yes.
and made the very concept of cinema even questionable to some. Against that odds or those odds, we're here. But you talk about culture. I think people also underestimate that, cinema is kind of synonymous to what we're about. We're communal.
Of course.
We love shared experiences.
Yeah.
I tell people we would make a show of buying a new car.
Yeah.
Get people together. Look at the concept of viewing centers, at the very low level, crusades for churches, traditional shows for various, community groups. And so I feel like we're getting a replica of that in cinema. I'm not sure what kind of cinema experience you've had in Nigeria, but there's some places you go, and yes, you want to go watch the film, but you want to watch the experience of the Nigerian reaction in that screen. Of course. Somebody having an expression, hooray, or kind of like a reaction to a very fun moment. It's unique. It's very peculiar, and it's one that you would normally get watching a Nigerian film.
Yes.
So it says a lot about we been finding a deeper sense of patriotism. Despite all the challenges around us, and we being receptive and appreciative of those people, telling the stories that we can relate to. I think that's what this box office kind of success represents.
Absolutely. As human beings, we have a deep communal instinct to gather.
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
suppose the stronger, the more deeply rooted the culture is,
Yes.
the greater the manifestation of that instinct.
Absolutely.
I remember our collective Wakanda moments
Yeah.
in England, and Nigerians going to watch the movie in Agbada.
Correct. And it's just so fascinating. And and thank you for picking on that, because one of the big things we've also seen, on the cinema scene and the box office is the fashion. And I remember we also had, there was Wakanda, there was the Black Panther, the first one, and there was the Wakanda Forever, whose premiere was held in Lagos. And I remember speaking to some of the key talent of the film, and particularly the director. He said he'd never witnessed something like that before. In fact, he said that was the most authentic cinema viewing experience. That he felt genuine. Said a number of places, even when the stars are there, it feels like they're just being, they're being polite.
Yes.
They don't want to act. But I felt in the wares that people had and in the expressions in the auditorium, it felt really genuine. So to hear that from, a foreigner of sorts, it also shows, something that we're getting right, and how proud we are of our culture. how much we want to show it off at the slightest.
Of course. Okay. So I'd like to return very briefly to your time at FilmHouse Group.
Yeah.
And just start with what you personally consider to be your greatest accomplishments there. And if you could append to that also a statement or two about what you believe to be some of the key challenges you encountered as a cinema exhibitor and distributor. And maybe many of those challenges still exist for those in our sector today.
Great question, sir. FilmHouse Group, fantastic time working with, I have to say, revolutionary minds, that we challenged ourselves every day. We came into a market where we knew there were opportunities, but we also knew that it would be challenging to assert ourselves. It would be challenging to stand out.
You and two co-founders.
Two co-founders, yes. Kenel Paru, my big brother, he takes a lot of credit for being the visionary, the one that saw what we all didn't see or in the way he saw it, and the one that was bold enough to make the moves. And Kenel Kosa as well, my friend of many years.
Did all three of you work at Odeon?
We all worked at Odeon. Myself and Kenel worked at Odeon for 6 years before Kenel moved to Nigeria. Kenel Paru had worked for Odeon for long. I think was probably the first black general manager, if I'm not right, or one of the first in Odeon, and had amassed a lot of experience. He was a high flyer, had worked across a number of cinemas, and the combination of our passion, raw passion, and what we'd experienced working in the Odeon, I think was palpable. It was something. And every time when we got to the room, where the ideas were not alien. The ideas were like, yeah, we've done this, but we can make it happen. I think what was just different was the environment we were in. Can we make it happen?
Yes.
But we forged along. We were able to make premium experiences affordable. I think there's a lot of people credit us with that. We sold tickets as cheap as 500 naira. On Wednesdays, on weekdays, and maybe at the highest point when we started off 1,000, 1,005, and we had the best sound. 5.1, 7.1 sound. Of course, other cinemas also had all of that, but we were able to do a lot of that, and we were audacious. And when we went for the IMAX, I think people thought, "What are we doing?" And the IMAX has become one of the top locations. In terms of my career highlight with the FilmHouse Group, there are a bunch of them, but the more I look at the power of collaboration, I think the wedding party is one of the very significant ones. I'm really, proud, and big shout out to Mwabudu for conceiving the idea of the wedding party. And a lot of people do not know. And I'm happy that we have, sessions, platforms like this to be able to revisit the origin stories of those kind of things. So she was very much the originator, creator of that concept, the wedding party. And like Moses, look, I think we should, can we do this together? Yeah. And I was like, wow, how wonderful. Yeah. Like, that would be nice. And I knew that
Mo and Moses and all.
Yes, exactly. Like, how would it be done? Yeah. So I reached out to our friends at Inkblot, and then my very good friend and big brother of blessed memory, Mr. Chris Jaibo of Kogo Studios. And I said, look, we have a formidable powerhouse in Mo with this great idea. We are great at the distribution and, of course, the exhibition. Inkblot have competence in, screenplay development and, as well as being a, aspiring production company. And Koga have equipment. Like, we have it all covered, guys. How can let's come together and do what has not been done before, And if you look at every metric, whether the number of tickets sold, and if you wanted to just convert the value of the box office that was generated to now, Wedding Party is one of the most successful, if not the most successful, film. Yeah. And I'm really happy about that because it demonstrated what could be done when, you really set your heart into collaboration. And there's been more collaboration since then. IMAX coming to the country, I'm happy, I had the preliminary conversations then. And, of course, it's a teamwork. Other moving parts needed to happen. And we're able to get that iconic, premium large formats into the country. So that represents a highlight. Working with Netflix and Prime to aggregate, a number of content was also a big highlight. Challenges. Talking to financiers about the film business and making them understand over time continues to be a challenge. As much as they see that there is an upward trajectory, there's something here. As much as, Afrobeats helps us, stake a claim that the creative sector has something, there is this, I don't know, lack of understanding. I don't know whether it's deliberate or not, that, it just doesn't feel like traditional investment for them. And so I feel like we've missed out on China-like growth, when it comes to cinema. We've missed out on Russia-like growth when it comes to cinema, because if we had a very intentional, finance sector that just looked at the sector and said, we're going to go for this and really double down and invest and maybe come with a development finance, approach, would not be where we are.
Yeah. But to what extent do you feel that is perhaps due to the fact that much of the operations in the film industry is informal and the lack of structure? To what extent do you feel that?
There's a point there. I'm not going to even deny that.
Because we've had bankers and others on this program who have said that.
There's a point there. There's the valid concern there. But what we're always preaching back is, look, we're here with the structure. Here are our revenue models. Correct. Here are the revenue channels. Correct. Here are the plans that we have. So it was cinema, and now we've attracted streaming to come in. Yeah. And of course, there are the likes of MultiChoice that do a great job with the TV licensing. So there are windows. Yes. And we've also said we can take it abroad. And we've also said, look, there's a work we can do. This thing, if you market it well and let people know, people will come out. Yeah. So it's also about risk taking.
Yes, of course.
And I just feel like there's not been enough compromise in that regard. Yeah. But you're right about the hesitation. You're right about those things. But I feel like, and this is where, not bashing the government again, perhaps governments coming in as well to reassure or creating a buffer for such kind of investments or some incentives. Everywhere around the world, there are kind of cultural, cultural incentives. In France, they're very big on that. In the UK, you would know, they're very big on those cultural incentives. Yeah, and I feel like that's what has been missing. So funding, big challenge. Film business skills, big challenge. Like, who are the people? Yes, it's not rocket science to be able to run a cinema, but to be able to run it effectively and to be able to give people a great experience. There is some dynamism to that. To be able to do film distribution competently, finding new avenues for you to be able to monetize, content, right? Coming up with the kind of strategies for film marketing, film PR, and all of that requires a level of, specialization. Yes. So that has always been a challenge as well. Piracy, it's the easy thing to pick out, but piracy has become more of a menace now. As we say, digital remains, the opportunity. We're seeing more digital piracy. We're seeing people, ignorantly and, would I say, naively partake in digital piracy from a sociable, like I'm being sociable, let me share. Illegally, and it's eroding a lot of value.
Yeah, go to the cinema and take a video.
Yeah, video. Thankfully, it doesn't happen in Nigeria for Nigerian content. Yeah. But once it gets on streaming or any internet platform, it just gets everywhere. Yeah. Those have been challenges that one has faced. And I think that another challenge we face in an era where there's so much information available to everyone, we have a challenge where the practitioners in the industry are very quick to compare us to a lot more mature and developed markets. People are not of the realization that we are an independent sector. right? Where everything is done by you, the production company. You know, we rarely have people commissioning or people having a slate of projects, you know, that are done and they're thinking end to end from development to market, you know. And so there are various outbursts, you know, without fully understanding the way it really works. And those outbursts also mislead the next generation. So those are challenges that we face. Because, for example, if you don't also understand how cinemas work, there are a lot of people that believe that the sharing formula with cinema is inequitable, very, very unfair, but without understanding the fundamentals of that business. So we have a lot of, you know, information kind of like, I don't want to call it mismanagement, misuse.
Asymmetry.
You know, asymmetry. I was going to kind of use that lingo, but and it distorts a lot of things. You know, so these are some of the challenges. But for me, I'm never phased because I feel like it's also symptomatic of an independent industry. You know, as we get more institutional capital, you know, we'll see big, you know, firms emerge. You know, we'll see a lot more structure. We'll see a lot more deals that people are used to and they hear of abroad. A lot of people talk about, you know, back-end deals, royalties, you know, being paid over time. And I always, by come back to them is the infrastructure for all of that, you know, in developed climes are there. We just started, you know, box office dissemination and transparency 6-7 years ago. You know, how do you then start judging how to, you know, appropriate backends or royalty payments? You know, so these are some of the, you know, various, you know,
growing pains
and continuous pains that we face, but look, it's part of business as well.
Of course. And on the subject of having independently verifiable data,
Yes.
and on the question of transparency, which you are obviously very big on, that is something that's directly linked, of course, to credibility and, you know, attracting funding and all of that. There are those who would observe the industry, particularly from outside, and say things like, there's been quite a lot of hype about the billions that have been, quote unquote, harvested by producers at the box office. Okay, a fair amount of secrecy about how producers and local content have been remunerated by global streamers. Would you say, and I know that there have been huge attempts to instill that culture of transparency, but would you say it still is a problem that there's this asymmetry of information and this gap in knowledge there?
There's still a gap in knowledge. I think there is selective, you know, I don't want to call it amnesia or selective memory or things, because we talk about and we share, you know, knowledge about what's going on, and people just kind of, you know, pick what is they feel is important to them. But again, I've seen that it's an opportunity to continue to reinforce and continue to share knowledge of how film business works in general. I think we have a duty. And in FilmHouse, FilmOne, I was, you know, publisher of a yearbook that's now gone on to be an annual publication about, you know, the box office and how it works and the results there. At Nile, we've also done something similar with a business intelligence document, which we want to broaden beyond just the box office, to just democratize access to information.
Of course.
And just help enlighten our people more and help them understand how it works, you know. But we still have that gap in terms of people understanding how it works, people working with the information to make better products, you know. That gap exists.
Yes, of course.
I would say that our diaspora have a strong voice, have become a lot more patriotic. You know, the music, the fashion, a lot of those things, you know, are driving, you know, curiosity in Nigerian culture, you know, globally. I think that, you know, I always reference it, I feel like popular Black culture is becoming Nigerian.